when you're in pain, soothing as a springtime rain, to have a friend right in your corner. Your heart will feel a little warmer. Tender loving care, tender loving care. Each warm and friendly touch lets someone know you care so much. Tender loving care, tender loving care.
Hello, my name is David Meyer. I'm sitting in for Dr. Ammon today. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and Seventh-day Adventists see the Bible as presenting God's interest in us physically as well as spiritually. So let's just turn to Psalm 103, just read the first few verses to see how this is illustrated there. In Psalm 103, we read, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless His holy name." So, God wants to have our just wholehearted response. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits. He benefits us. Everything we have comes from Him. Life and just all the blessings that we have, abilities, mental and physical abilities. So He doesn't want us to forget those benefits. Who forgiveth all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases. So here we see the spiritual and the physical combined right in the same sentence. Who forgiveth all thine iniquities. We see the spiritual part. Who healeth all thy diseases. We see the physical part. Who redeemeth thy life from destruction. Who crowneth thee with loving kindness and tender mercies. Again, the spiritual. And then we have the physical. Who satisfieth thy mouth with good things, so that thy youth is renewed like the eagles. So He gives us good things to eat, things that taste good, that are good for us, that are for our blessing, for our physical blessing. So He's interested in our physical needs as well as our spiritual needs, and makes provision to provide for us. So let's look first at that healing all the diseases. He heals all our diseases. So there are these mechanisms that He's built into our body, blood clotting and wound healing. And this is something that we just, take for granted. If we get a little nick or scratch, I do carpenter work, and I often get nicks and scratches and so forth, and it may bleed a little bit, but, I just put a Band-Aid on it and go on and don't worry about it, because what? I know it's going to heal. Let me tell you a story that, illustrates that kind of thing. I had a young friend, and he had one of these bouncy balls that has a handle, and you sit on, you bounce on it. And it somehow got punctured and got a hole in it. So he took it to his daddy. His daddy put a tire patch on it, pumped it up, and it worked fine. And so Dougie was happy with it. But, as a curious little boy, he picked on the patch and eventually picked it off. And he took it to his daddy, and he said, "Daddy, it didn't heal." Well, we smile because we know, of course it's not going to heal. It's an inanimate object. And we're used to people and animals healing, but inanimate objects don't. So this clotting mechanism, this wound healing mechanism is built in to protect us from excessive blood loss. The body has built into it mechanisms to maintain chemical and physical balances. Chemical balances like the acid-base balance in the body. That has to be within a narrow range. The temperature range, physical balances like blood pressure, like the temperature. It can be 100 degrees outside, it can be 40 degrees outside. Your core body temperature isn't going to vary very much. And, if your temperature is off more than a degree or a little bit more, it's cause for concern, and the doctor will, try to find a reason for that, or it's an indication of what may be wrong with you. So these chemical and physical balances are maintained by the body within very careful ranges, or fairly narrow ranges. The body can neutralize poisons. Now again, these systems can be overwhelmed. If you cut an artery and it's pumping blood, you're probably not going to be able to clot it and stop that bleeding. And same way with the physical balances in the body. If you fall out of a boat into freezing water, you only have a limited time before your body temperature is going to start to drop, because the systems are overwhelmed. Same way with the poison. Poisons can overwhelm the body's ability, but it can take care of poisons to an amazing extent. If you drink alcohol to the point of passing out, once you pass out, the body is processing that alcohol, and eventually you regain consciousness because the body has neutralized the poison. My brother got bit on the hand by a copperhead. He put charcoal slurry on his arm. He also took it internally, and in the charcoal, he'd change the charcoal about every 5 minutes. But there were red streaks that started up his wrist, but then they started to recede. Why was that? Well, the body was dealing with the poison, and he recovered and had no, long-term adverse effects. And so we can see the importance of the chemical or the poison neutralization abilities that the body has. The body can deal with bacteria and viruses. The body is equipped for this. For instance, if you get the cold, or if you get a flu, or come down with something like that, you expect to get well. Now, there are people that do die of flu, people that are in weakened condition or something. But normally, you recover, and that's because your immune system is able to combat the microorganisms and to be successful in that combat. If they're not successful, you die. So the fact that you're alive and that I'm alive mean that so far our immune system has always been successful in combating the microorganisms that we've encountered, and we're encountering them all the time. The environment around us is certainly not a sterile environment, and so we're in contact with those things all the time, and the body is effectively dealing with them and handling them and being successful in that. It's also dealing with rogue cells, our own cells, that become cancerous. This all works so effectively that a doctor friend of ours said that 80% of the people who go to the doctor will get well if the doctor does nothing. Now, doctors are important. They play an important role. But our bodies are constantly protecting us and repairing damage that has been done. And so those capabilities are there, and they're active all the time. They're constantly protecting us. Now, let's look at the other facet that was talking about there in Psalm 103. That he satisfies our mouth with good things. What has God given us for food? In the Bible we read in Genesis 1 that God created man in his image, and then he made food for man. So he made man with certain needs, for certain kind needs for a certain kind of food, and then he made the food to meet those needs. So this is what it says. And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree-yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat," or for food. And then later he added, "the herb of the field, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field," or the vegetables. So this is summarized by a Christian writer in these words from the book Ministry of Healing, page 296. "Grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. These foods, prepared in as simple and natural a manner as possible, are the most healthful and nourishing." And Dr. T. Colin Campbell, a nutrition researcher at Cornell University, wrote at the end of his career a statement that summarized his discoveries, or the conclusions he had come to after a career of research and studying the scientific literature. He said that we should eat a whole foods, plant-based diet while minimizing the consumption of refined foods, added salts, and added fats. That's from a book he wrote called The China Study, page 242. So we see that the Bible and science are in agreement about the food that is most healthful and nourishing for us. So we have fruit, grain, nuts, and vegetables, foods that are attractive, tasty, healthful, nourishing, energizing, vitalizing. So let's look at some food facts, some information about foods in general. So think about a city. What does it need? It needs fresh air for the people and for vehicles and for like heating systems and so forth, like furnaces and things like that. It needs fresh water, again, for the people and for industrial processes and so forth. It needs energy and fuel. It needs building materials, and it needs supplies for operation and maintenance. As human beings, we have those same needs. And we need fresh air. We need fresh water. Of course, we get that from the air, and we get that from water we drink. The fuel, the building materials, and the supplies for maintenance and operation come from the food we eat. And so, how does this relate to food? Carbohydrates provide the energy, fat is storage, protein is the building materials, and vitamins and minerals provide for bodily regulation and daily operation and so forth. So let's look at this in a little more detail. Energy. Photosynthesis uses energy from the sun to produce glucose according to this formula, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water. With energy from the sun, produce a molecule of glucose and 6 molecules of oxygen. Now, this is a simple formula, but it is profound, and really this is just kind of the summary formula. This takes place in a number of steps, fairly complex steps that take place in the plant leaves in the presence of, they get the carbon dioxide from the air, they get the water from the soil, and of course they get the energy from the sunlight, the energy that powers this reaction. And the glucose contains in its chemical bonds that energy from the sun. So then glucose is used as the fuel for plant and animal cells. The plant uses it to fuel its own life processes, and animals use this energy that's stored in the glucose to fuel the energy that's required for their bodily processes and for muscular activity and mental activity and so forth. So, the glucose molecules can be chained together. They're like links in a chain. They can be chained together. A few hundred make a starch, and 1,000 or more make cellulose or fiber. Plant cells have cellulose cell walls, and so the structure of the plant is built up from this substance that the plant itself produces. When a seed is planted and it sprouts and it puts down a root that can get water, it puts up a shoot and a leaf that can get carbon dioxide from the air and can get sunshine, it can start to produce glucose, and then it produces glucose that it can use for its own growth. And so, we chain a few glucose molecules together to make a starch, and here we have an example of a starch. We chain together some more to make cellulose or plant fiber, and here we see these grass stems supported by the fiber or cellulose that has been made from glucose. Here we have corn stalks that are supported by this cellulose or fiber that's made from glucose. And here we have a tree that's supported by the fiber made from the fiber or cellulose that's made from glucose. So you can see glucose is an extremely versatile substance. It can be used for energy. It can be used for building in these cases. So this is an energy package that we would use for energy. This potato is an energy package. The plant stores starch in this potato, and then we can use that for energy. These wheat kernels or grains are energy packages that can be ground into flour. So, how important is glucose? Well, glucose is essential. If our blood sugar goes too low, we pass out. If it goes too high, we pass out. It's the fuel for every cell in our body. It fuels our muscle cells, it fuels our brain cells. So we see carbohydrates provide energy. Fat provides storage. If you take in more energy or calories or food than you need, the body simply puts it in storage. And fat is actually efficient storage. 1 gram of fat contains 9 calories, where each gram of protein or carbohydrate only contains about 4 calories. And so you can pack twice the amount of calories into the same amount of space, which, when it comes to storage, is good because it's efficient storage. Now, the protein are the building materials. I do building. And suppose, and there are about 20 some different amino acids that the protein is composed of. So these are the building blocks of protein. So if I had 20 some different kinds of building blocks, and as much as I needed of each kind, how many different buildings could I build? I could build an infinite number of different buildings with that variety of building blocks, and an infinite number of, as many as I needed available of each one. So proteins, the amino acids, can be built into huge proteins. The DNA molecule has 126 million amino acids on just the rungs of the ladder. DNA protein is like a twisted ladder with the rungs. And just the rungs of the ladder have 126 million amino acids. And so we see this as a huge protein. Proteins are huge molecules. And so an infinite number of proteins can be made from these 20-some amino acids. So how much protein do we need? Well, we need enough, but we don't need extra. We don't really need a lot. This is taken from a WebMD article on how much protein do we need. Protein tends to play a starring role at meal times, but you might be better off if it moves out of the spotlight and becomes part of the supporting cast of foods on your plate. Most Americans get more than enough protein each day. Although important in the diet, extra protein will not help you build more muscles or make you stronger. You need protein because it has its hands in every critical function of the body, says Leslie Bronchi, MPH and RD, Director of Sports Nutrition at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. But the truth about protein is that many people don't need as much as they're taking in. But it's important to remember that most Americans, including athletes, get plenty of protein in their regular diet and do not need protein supplements. Protein should make up no more than 1/3 of your plate at meals. So, in our society, we probably don't need to worry about getting enough protein. How much do we need? A variety of whole foods that provides adequate calories provides plenty of protein. So whole foods, unrefined foods, are made, remember, God made the foods for us. He made them to meet our needs, and so those foods, the way they grow, contain adequate protein. Since very few of us get too few calories, we don't need to worry about getting enough protein. In other words, we get plenty of calories, we're going to get plenty of protein. If you have a variety of nutritious food and you're getting enough calories, you'll get enough protein. Since many people eat more calories than necessary and a lot of high protein foods, many people get too much protein. And just like calories, too much protein is more of a problem than too little. So, why is excessive protein a problem? Proteins are digested into amino acids. This has an acidifying effect in the body. The body needs to maintain a correct acid-base balance, and so it uses calcium to buffer and balance the acid, just like Tums contain calcium. And so the body uses calcium to buffer the acid, and it takes that calcium from the bone. So osteoporosis is not caused by a lack of calcium, it's caused by an excess of protein. Protein is not stored, it must be eliminated. It's eliminated through the kidneys. An excess puts a burden on the kidneys, can lead to kidney disease and kidney failure, and the need to help the kidneys by means of something like kidney dialysis. So we don't want to put too much burden on the kidneys. If a person has kidney disease, or put on a low-protein diet. Well, that's so they won't have excess that they have to get rid of. So what does that mean? That means that's the amount they really need. So now what about high-protein, low-carb diets? Well, they're not good for you. They make you sick. They force the body to burn fat for fuel. And actually, studies show that the weight loss seems to come from the restriction of calories because of the rules that go with these diets. You don't feel well because you're not. They are difficult and unhealthy to maintain indefinitely, and there are better ways to lose weight. We're going to talk about that in a few weeks. So, all these high-protein, low-carb books, the Atkins diet, the paleo diet, the protein diet, South Beach diet, the zone diet, enter the zone, eat fat, lose fat, sugar busters, wheat belly, grain brain. So we saw, where does energy come from? Energy comes from glucose. That's what fuels cells of our body. That's the fuel it was made to use. It can use fat if it has to, but it's made to use glucose. And so, really, carbohydrates are the source that we were made to get our energy from. And then the gluten-free focus is kind of an outgrowth of this low-carb thing. There are some people who are sensitive to gluten, but people who are not really don't need to worry about it. You need to make sure that you aren't sensitive to gluten, or that, yes, but if you are, you should be careful. But if not, it's not something to worry about. So, high protein, animal products contain no carbohydrates. That leaves fat and protein. We don't want extra fat. Animal fat is saturated fat as well. And we don't want extra protein. Remember, it puts a burden on the kidneys. It causes osteoporosis. So, should we have low carb or high carb? The problem with carbs is not that they're carbohydrates. It's that most of them are refined. Refined carbohydrates are bad. Unrefined carbohydrates are good, like whole grains, Irish potatoes and sweet potatoes, winter squash. So these things are unrefined carbohydrates, and they're good for us. Refined carbs are the ones that are bad. Now, the problem is enriched flour, in which 20-some nutrients have been removed, and then maybe like half a dozen have been put back, and it's called enriched, is what makes up is the main ingredient of almost all baked products that we find in the store, like bread, biscuits, bagels, cakes, cookies, snack cakes, crackers, donuts, pasta, pies, pizza, pretzels, frozen waffles, pancakes, and the kinds of mixes that you bake into things. So, right, these kinds of carbs are a problem because they're refined. Now, what about milk and protein content? Well, we see that human milk is about 1/3 of the protein content of cow's milk. Now remember, we don't want extra protein. And the human milk is what we were designed to, live on. And we see that as animals double their weight more rapidly, they have a higher protein content. So if people are really interested in high protein, what kind of milk should they drink? Well, we see here on this list that rat milk is the highest percentage of protein. We probably have a hard time selling that. But you can see where this protein emphasis kind of leads to. So do we need animal protein? You can just look at the bottom of the slide here. Do we need animal protein for growth, for strength, for energy? Well, let's look at some examples. Here we have a yoke of oxen, and in the grass there is a huge log. You can't see it real well, but they're pulling that log, and on the right there you can see these again, yokes of oxen pulling huge logs up over these terraces, right? But do these animals, what kind of protein do these animals have? Well, protein they get is plant protein, and they have plenty of growth and strength and energy. Here again, we have animals that live on plant foods, and so the protein they get is plant protein. And look at the pile of logs that sled those horses are pulling. So again, we see that plant protein in these cases is perfectly adequate for growth and strength and energy. And here again, we have a work situation where a plant-eating animal is able to grow large and strong and have the energy to, to be a work animal. So, we see that the Bible gives the food for us as grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables, that these constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. These foods prepared in as simple and natural a manner as possible are the most healthful and nourishing. And science says to eat a whole foods, plant-based diet while minimizing the consumption of refined foods, added salt, and added fats. So the foods that God made, that God gave us, the fruit, grains, nuts, and vegetables, are for our enjoyment, for our nourishment. And the refined foods and the processed foods have all kinds of chemicals in them. The colors and flavors in the processed foods are often even carcinogenic. And the ones in the natural foods, for instance in the fruits and the vegetables, the colors, the bright colors there, are actually antioxidants. So the colors there are good for us. The flavors there are things that are healthful rather than what we have in the processed foods. And of course then the basic foods themselves, the plant foods as opposed to the animal foods. They're low in protein, they're low in fat, they're high in nutrients, they contain fiber that is beneficial for us. We'll look more at fiber when we're talking about weight control in a few weeks. But the fiber is beneficial as far as regularity is concerned, and there's other benefits to fiber that we'll also look at when we talk about heart disease next week. So in summary, whole plant foods provide growth, strength, and energy. Whole plant foods provide plenty of protein, but not too much. Whole plant foods provide plenty of energy, but not too much. So we should build our food around the starch rather than the protein, and the protein will take care of itself. We don't need to worry about the protein. If we're eating those whole plant foods, we'll get adequate protein. So, let's go back to our Psalm 103, verses 1 to 5. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless His holy name. So we can just wholeheartedly respond to Him. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits. He wants us to remember all these good things that He gives us. Who forgiveth all thine iniquities, who healeth all thy diseases, who redeemeth thy life from destruction, who crowneth thee with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfieth thy mouth with good things, so that thy youth is renewed like the eagles. God is interested in our physical welfare and our spiritual welfare. He's interested in our health and healing. He's interested in our food. He loves us and demonstrates that in spiritual ways and in physical ways. He's a God that we can really appreciate and respond to.
Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, written by Dr. Harold D. Allman. A collection of 55 short stories about his experience as a small-town doctor in central West Virginia. And Tender Loving Care. Stories from a West Virginia Doctor, Volume 2, written by Dr. Greenbrier Allman, using videotapes to write 70 additional stories of his father's very colorful life as a small-town doctor. They can be found for purchase at Amazon.com and most local bookstores. Tune into Channel 3 Buckhannon for Tender Loving Care with Dr. Greenbrier Allman, where he talks about the connection between Christianity and medicine.